Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're looking at the secret rares found within the brand new Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links main box, Darkness Gimmick. Gimmick Puppet Gigantes Doll is a dark attribute machine type Xyz monster. It's a rank 4 with 0 attack and 2000 defense. It requires 2 level 4 Gimmick Puppet monsters to summon it, and you can detach 2 materials from this card, then target up to 2 monsters your opponent controls. Gain control of them until the end phase. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot special summon monsters except Gimmick Puppet monsters, nor declare an attack except with Xyz monsters. You contribute this card, all monsters you currently control become level 8 until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Gimmick Puppet Gigantes Doll once per turn. This card is very specific to the Gimmick Puppets, no wonder why. It has quite a useful ability. Firstly, it does require only Gimmick Puppets. It's level 4 monsters, very easy to do. There are a mixture of Gimmick Puppets that are level 4 and level 8, so they work along that side, that kind of synergy. It's detaching 2 materials to take up to 2 monsters your opponent controls. It doesn't have to be exactly 2 monsters, which means if you happen to have another monster on your field anyway, it's not a problem. This isn't a mandatory effect, you can use it as and when you need to. By stealing those monsters, you're then able to get rid of Gigantes Doll, make those into level 8, and then go into one of your Xyz monsters, be it Puppet of Strings, or Giant Grinder, or even one of the other Xyz monsters. Of course, with any type of effect that's this powerful, it does have restrictions in its name. It firstly means you can't summon anything other than Gimmick Puppets for the rest of that turn, which means you're locked into those monsters. It's fine, that's how you're going to be running the deck. And the other thing is, no monsters outside of Xyz monsters can attack during that turn. Again, it's fine, you're probably going to be going into an Xyz play again during that turn, which means you will at least get 1 attack off successfully. Number 22, Zombiestein, is a dark attribute zombie type Xyz monster. It's a rank 8 with 4500 attack and 1000 defense. You require 2 level 8 dark monsters to summon it, and it must be Xyz summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card and send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. Then target 1 face-up monster, then target 1 face-up card your opponent controls, change this card to defense position, and if you do that, face-up card has its effects negated until the end of this turn. This is one of those examples of a monster that has very powerful in terms of its attack, but it's not something you really want to rely on its effects for. Another example is, I think, number 30, Acid Golem, because basically its Xyz materials are used to prevent you from taking effect damage and to actually let it attack. This has the same kind of limitations. First, it requires 2 level 8 dark monsters to summon, which means it can only be used within certain types of decks, or you can use it in other decks, but you're going to need to be running things like DNA Transplant to adapt your attributes. Another condition is it has to be Xyz summoned. It cannot be special summoned by other ways. That is a massive limitation to it, so it can't be splashed into other things very easily. The limitation on its effect is also quite useful in that you can actually shut down a number of effects. It can be monster, spell, or trap cards, so long as they're face up. But the concerns are, firstly, this goes to defense mode. Normally that's fine for some monsters, but this has 1000 defense, so, 4500 attack, even just keeping it as a beat stick might be more reasonable than to use this for its effect. You're also going to have to discard to use the effect. So not only is it limited to what it can do, it's limited to how it can interact. It's not a free card, and it's quite a heavy price to splash into your deck, especially with the limitations on extra deck monsters being at the moment up to 7. It's not something I would justify putting into the extra deck above any other rank 8 monster that can do better job. Number 46, Dragluon, is a light attribute dragon type Xyz monster. It's a rank 8 with 3000 attack and 3000 defense. It requires 2 level 8 dragon type monsters to summon it, and once per turn, if you control no other monsters, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card, then activate one of these effects. Special summon 1 dragon type monster from your hand, target 1 dragon type monster your opponent controls, take control of that target. All dragon type monsters your opponent controls cannot activate their effects until the end of your opponent's turn. This is a very key card that can be used within many dragon type decks. Blue Eyes White Dragon can use it quite easily. I think Dragunity have some monsters that can introduce within this, maybe things like Heretics. And the condition is just dragon type monsters that are level 8. that's fine. There are so many decks that support this, even if you're looking at just standard dragons as an example. It can only use its effect if you have no other monsters on the field, so keep in mind it's typically only going to be able to use its effect maybe the once. Being able to special summon a dragon type monster just for free is perfectly decent, because you're able to go into some of your more powerful monsters without having to require going into tributes or to meet certain conditions. The secondary ability is to be able to just steal one of your opponent's dragon type monsters. It's good in mirror matches or matches where you've got your opponent running certain types of decks or archetypes where you know they're consistently running certain dragons. And the third effect is really more to shut down your opponent's dragon type monsters. Again, this is good in a mirror match because you're able to shut them down. They're not able to use their effect until the end of their turn, which means you've got a full turn of yours and your opponent's before they can actually respond with their monsters. I think this is again a very popular number monster that lots of people are planning to pick up and use. Bear in mind the meta will focus and shift towards dragon type monsters as more of this generic support comes out for them. Gimmick Puppet Bisque Doll is a level 8 dark attribute machine type monster with 1000 attack and 1000 defense. And its effect is you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding one Gimmick Puppet monster. You can banish this card from your graveyard. Your opponent cannot target Gimmick Puppet monsters you control with card effects this turn. So this has double utility. First, it's a level 8 monster, so your more powerful Xyz monsters that are Gimmick Puppets, number 15, number 40, can be summoned much more easily. And also by discarding a Gimmick Puppet, if it's one that can actually revive from the graveyard, you can then trigger off that effect. The other thing is this does have a double utility in its secondary effect because it can banish itself to be able to protect your Gimmick Puppet monsters from card effects during the turn. That means if you know you can actually win during that turn, you're able to defeat your opponent very easily without them being able to respond. Gimmick Puppet Dreary Doll is a dark attribute level 8 monster. It's a machine type with 0 attack and 0 defense. And the effect is if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one other Gimmick Puppet monster from your graveyard, special summon this card from your graveyard. You can only use this effect of Gimmick Puppet Dreary Doll once per turn. This card cannot be used as an Xyz material or an Xyz summon except for the Xyz summon of a Gimmick Puppet monster. Again, this is also a very easy way of you going into your rank 8 Xyz monsters that are Gimmick Puppets. You're just able to, if this card has just been discarded or sent to the graveyard, you're then able to revive it by banishing another Gimmick Puppet, and then you can go into your Xyz monster that easily. It does limit you to the Gimmick Puppet archetype, but that's more reasonable because that's how it's intended to be played. Neospatian Grand Mole is a level 3 Earth attribute rock type effect monster with 900 attack and 300 defense. And its effect is at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can return both the opponent's monster and this card to the hand. You might be questioning why is this card useful, considering that you're having to summon this and then return this and an opponent's monster to the respective hands. But actually, if their opponent has a monster that had heavy investment into summoning it, an extra deck monster such as Synchro Monster or an Xyz monster, it's a lot more difficult for them to return those monsters to the field than for you to consistently summon this each and every turn. It's a very annoying card to kind of counteract, and there are very limited ways you can actually react to this, which most players won't directly be responding to. Photon Orbital is a light machine type level 4 with 500 attack and 2000 defense. Its effect is, during your main phase, you can target one Photon or Galaxy monster you control, equip this monster from your hand or field to that target, it gains 500 attack, also it cannot be destroyed by battle. You can send this equipped card to the graveyard, add one Photon or Galaxy monster from your deck to your hand, except Photon Orbital. You can only use this effect of Photon Orbital once per turn. The first thing is, it can equip to any of your Photon or Galaxy monsters. That includes the boss monster Photon Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, or for any of the other monsters that count as part of the archetype. It's only a 500 attack point boost, which isn't much, but it does prevent it from being destroyed in battle. Very useful for cards such as Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. The only concern is its banishing effect means that both yours and your opponent's monsters are banished, which means that this card would instantly go to the graveyard. I wish it had the designed effect where if it had been equipped to your Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, that it would then return to your hand. but I think that would also be expecting a bit too much. You're also then, if it's no longer viable for using this card, being able to just send it to the graveyard just as a free search for one of your key monsters. Solar Wind Jammer is a light attribute machine type level 5 with 800 attack and 2400 defense. And its effect is, if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, but its original attack and defense becomes halved. During each of your standby phases, increase the level of this card by 1. There can only be one Solar Wind Jammer on the field. This was one of the 2 cards that Quentin used in order to summon his number 9 Dyson Sphere. Basically, he used this alongside Planet Pathfinder, since they were of the same type and both had under 1000 attack points. I think Planet Pathfinder had exactly 1000. He was able to use 10 House Gate to make both of their levels 9 because one was level 5. Planet Pathfinder was level 4, you just added those together and they both became that number. And then he was able to get Dyson Sphere from that. It's very easy to summon this card because it's just an instant special summon. And actually, I would argue if you manage to keep this card around, it's more flexible within most types of decks because it increases its level each and every turn. If you've got other monsters that can do that or are able to summon themselves a lot quicker, such as Fusilier Dragon the Dual Mode Beast, which treats itself as a level 7 monster, but again it splits its attack and defense in half, you're able to go into a much greater variety of Xyz monsters with no real cost. Magical Hound is an Earth attribute machine type tuner monster. It's level 1 with 500 attack and 800 defense. And its effect is, if this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can target one face-up spell or trap card your opponent controls, return it to the hand, and if you do, special summon this card. You can only use this effect of Magical Hound once per duel. I don't really understand what the purpose of this card is, outside of it being able to special summon itself. Okay, it might be able to disrupt your opponent's strategy if they've got cards on the field that are annoying you and are restricting you from playing certain things. Yes, I can understand why that's relevant, but otherwise it's a level 1 tuner monster. It's fine, you're able to go into a synchro summon within the turn. It's neither here nor there, it's an okay monster. Vampire Awakening is a normal trap card with the effect special summon one vampire monster from your deck, but destroy it during the end phase of this turn. You can only activate one Vampire Awakening per turn. This has 2 uses to it. First one is actually with Vampire Lord, because if it's destroyed by a card effect, it's instantly revived during your next standby phase, so you can actually use it for that. Secondary thing is, it's just being able to special summon a vampire monster. You can then overlay that with another of your vampire monsters to make your rank 5 Xyz monster, therefore negating the destruction effect of this card. And the final secret rare card is Xyz Tribal Rivals. It's a continuous trap card with the effect face-up Xyz monsters on the field with 2 or more Xyz materials cannot be destroyed by card effects. After damage calculation, if an Xyz monster you control battles an opponent's monster, destroy that opponent's monster. That Xyz monster must have 2 or more Xyz materials attached to it to activate and to resolve this effect. This is probably one of the more annoying Xyz traps that were actually introduced within the anime. Firstly, it requires your Xyz monsters to have 2 or more Xyz materials to have the protection from card effects, which is fine if you've got certain monsters. I know Illuminite requires 3 materials, you've got things such as Terabyte that needs 3 materials, but if you happen to have used these materials, then you've wasted your time actually drawing into this card. The other thing is the whole damage after damage calculation is also a decent effect, but it's also conditional on having at least 2 Xyz materials, and therefore your opponent's probably either going to get rid of this card, or they're going to find a way to try and force you to use up some of your materials, in which therefore your Xyz monsters can't rely on this card. Overall, I've got to say that this is probably my least favourite of the secret rare cards. I just don't see the value in it. I think it's a bit too weak for what it needs to be, and it's just too conditional. And my favourite would be number 46 dragluon, because I saw that within the anime itself. I know it's one of the mythic numbers that Mizar was partnered with and helped him to remember his past. It also serves as very decent support for the dragon archetypes themselves. What do you guys think of these cards? Is there any ones that you didn't like? Is there any ones you did like? Leave those comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.